No, you're right. I think just the last few years, this has dramatically changed. And I think geopolitics today is actually about who dominates technologies in the future, and especially digital technologies. And of course, connectivity is a key part of that digital stack for the future. And that's why we happen to come in the middle of geopolitics today. And that's a big change compared to just a few years ago.
We've had these conversations over the years when Huawei was effectively cut out of the core. Now we've seen from the numbers that Huawei seems to be back, at least in terms of selling to the consumer internationally. What do you make of the fierce competition now from the Chinese? Are they back in 2025?
For sure, it's our biggest competitor. It's no doubt that China has their own vendor ecosystem that they are promoting. And that, of course, makes it very competitive for us. So we need to make sure that we can lead the industry again on innovation, new use cases on top of the network, how you actually use the network. So we're seeing them as the big competitor.
What are the potential consequences of this US pushback around NATO, around Ukraine, around its involvement with Western allies, is whether the partnerships hold around chip and technology, because Europe has sided with the United States, with the Americans, to the expense of the Chinese. Could all this change? Could you see Europe team up and take more Chinese technology in future?
Well, first of all, I think we need to take a step back. So if you look at Europe, it's not, it's still open for business for the Chinese vendors, right? So Europe is still buying a large part of Chinese gear. So we compete with Huawei, CTE, also here in Europe. They are our fiercest competitor already today. So I wouldn't say that Europe has decided where they're going to be on this map. I think that kind of still remains an open question.
Let me tackle tariffs with you, because in the United States we're watching what happens with Canada, Mexico and China when it comes to the 10+10. Is there going to be some inflation impact in the vendor supply chain thanks to tariffs?
How the tariffs will look like ultimately, we don't know. So it's hard to quantify the impact. But we can expect some sort of impact when and if tariffs come. But I would also say we took some steps very early on. So we have built local manufacturing in the US. We have broadened the supply chain, so we have a much broader supply chain today. Will it leave us completely impact-free? I doubt it. But we continue to invest in US manufacturing and US presence. So for us, we have to do what we can to manage. This is purely a political question, and the political systems need to decide on that.
You've been one of the strongest industry critics on European regulation. It's a regulatory-first approach. Is there any sense that this is changing and that Europe is getting its act together?
I would say if we want to be positive, and I think that's often the best way to attack a problem, we're actually starting to see that the European Commission and European politicians understand we have an issue. And that's the first step in starting to address them. So I'm getting a bit more optimistic, but where I'm still concerned is we're moving without the speed necessary. And what's happening in the US under the Trump administration is a rather aggressive cutting of red tape, simplification, and that will put the US on a strong trajectory. And unless we match that in Europe, we're going to fall further behind. So I think Europe has to realize the issue, starting to be tick mark on that, but we also need to move with speed.